Hey everyone, welcome back this week. I am really excited to bring you this guest, and like I'm always really excited about my guest anyway. I know I always say that, but I am. This is going to be Travis Nass. He is someone that I've known since high school, and especially after talking with him this recent interview, God, I'm so proud of him. It's funny how in high school we're partly who we're going to be, but we're partly not too. And I just think that I always saw him as so much younger than me for some reason. I think because he looked really young, and I always felt like maybe just always felt a bit old anyway in high school. But he's done so much stuff. First of all, he was a bartender and really like a mixologist, I would say, and just created these amazing cocktails and amazing cocktail menus and things like that, which I like alcohol. So I do like good drinks though, and I just think that it's cool that someone found a passion in service of that kind. And in the service industry, I think especially the pandemic has really brought a lot of things to light, but one of those things is, we have restaurant workers, we have people whose career this is, and that's from the person who's starting out bussing tables all the way through to someone who's running a kitchen or running a restaurant or even owning one. And the pandemic was really hard on that industry. And I think also in the US, I'm in London now, so you're not tipping. You really don't. I'll tip just because I'm American, so I'll tip pretty often, but a lot of people don't. And it's the culture here because people are getting paid more of a living or decent wage to do this work, where in the US it's just not what we do. And Travis brought up some really good points around that I hadn't thought of, around the inequity of tipping structures. And right now in the States, there's been a lot of talk around states reducing the federal aid that they're getting for unemployment because people are making more on unemployment than they are at work. And that's not a rumor. That's not a thing where, people are just saying that. It's true. But the problem isn't the people. The problem isn't the people working. The problem is that the wages are the way they are. That's really the issue, right? So you can't say, well, this people being lazy. No, it's actually people are in a industry and in careers and in situations where they're able to provide for their families better by not working. So that should be seen as the problem, not just the fact that they're doing that. It's not something they're doing. It's actually something that's happened to them. And so, I don't know. It was a really interesting chat for me in that respect. So we get into a lot because we talk through his career and what's led him to found an amazing nonprofit organization. All that to say, he founded a nonprofit with a partner, and I don't know. It's just really cool because you're just seeing people finding something that's wrong and trying to fix it. And I think that is one of the things I respect most. There's that, and then there's like the whole aspect of people having creative careers, and I love that too. But I think people really inspire me who see a problem and they try to fix it and they try to find a way to do that. And he's found a really unique way of doing that. His charity just had a big fundraiser, but you can still donate to them. So I would definitely like people to go and look up Another Round, Another Rally, if you're interested in a place to give where you can contribute to somewhere that will help people directly impacted by job loss or job displacement or even temporary job loss due to the pandemic, or even before or after, because there are other things that affect restaurant workers like healthcare. If they hurt their foot, they can't just work from home, for example, as well. So there's just all kinds of stuff. So I really like how this episode, it's lighthearted and we have a lot of fun, but it's also really eye-opening for how someone and many organizations are actually working to help improve the lives of people who we rely on to serve us, really. One other thing that we got into is volunteerism that Travis does, and it really resonated with me when he was volunteering because he wanted to support something, show that he was for something, rather than only protesting against. And there's value in protest and activism, and it's important. And I've done some protesting, not much, but I've done some. But I've always been of the mindset about volunteering as well. And I didn't think of it in that way, though, where you're volunteering to be for something and show you're for something. So that was a nice way to reframe it for me. But anyway, I hope you really enjoy this. I've gone on long enough. I'm trying to minimize my rants or whatever these are to under 5 minutes. I've almost hit that goal today. But thanks so much for being here. Thanks for listening. If you can follow us, review us, that'd be really appreciated. If you have guest ideas, let me know. And enjoy the episode. Welcome to More Than Work, the podcast reminding you that your self-worth is defined by more than your job title. I'm Rabia, an IT project manager, comedian, nonprofit volunteer, and sometimes activist. Every week, I'll chat with a guest about pursuing passions outside of work or creating meaningful opportunities inside the workplace. As you listen, I hope you'll be inspired to do the same. Here we go. Well, everyone, this week is going to be a lot of fun. I actually have someone I went to high school with, and we were in band together, not band geeks. At least one of us wasn't. He was in the drum line, and I was in the pit. So, you know.
I think that's arguable. I would definitely consider myself a band geek.
Okay, so he was a band geek, but we were in he was in the cool part of the band. I was in the part of the band where we got to skip PE, but we didn't actually march. So I'm talking to Travis Nass. He's the co-founder and chief operating officer at Another Round, Another Rally. How's it going, Travis?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Doing well. Thank you. Thanks. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Me too.
Let's just start with, I guess, what's Another Round, Another Rally for people who haven't heard of that?
Another Round, Another Rally is a nonprofit organization that's focused on the hospitality industry. We provide emergency assistance funds as well as professional development funds for the hospitality industry, with a focus on helping those who have been historically excluded from bar and restaurant leadership.
What made you start the organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Amanda Gunderson, our co-founder, and myself had worked together previously in a kind of a small spirits broker based out of LA. And we never really made a move either personally or professionally ever since then without kind of consulting each other and talking through ideas. And it was a few years ago now that we were kind of lamenting the lack of resources for the hospitality industry and wanted to talk through, ways we could help. We were always being in that kind of brand ambassador role. Education is a big part of that. And we were always trying to figure out a way to make that part of the industry a little more inclusive, and those folks that don't necessarily get the same opportunities as some other folks. And we also saw this big kind of problematic part of the industry where the vast majority of the industry doesn't have healthcare or any other protections in the workplace, and what we're talking about what we could do to help in that area as well. And that kind of started the brainstorming process that ended up becoming Another Round, Another Rally. And that first year, 2018, we put together our business plan and started putting together our board of directors and went through a brand new process. We had an amazing branding team with Al Collective, and Ty Largo and their team did an amazing job coming up with their branding and name. And we went through the whole process with them and created this beautiful identity that really spoke to us and spoke to the needs of the industry. And we've kind of taken off and run with that. And since then, we've been able to, in the last year, we've helped over 10,000 people and been really grown exponentially from where we thought we would be by now.
Do you think that you would have been able to use your organization at some point early in your career? And we'll go actually at the start of your career, like you were in hospitality and service for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
But is that something that when you were putting it together, were you thinking about like maybe even ways that you could have used support earlier on, or did it just come from you having listened to so many people as being part of the industry?
That's a great question. I think there's for sure times that I could have benefited from an organization such as this. So I've been in the hospitality industry or tangential to it for 20 plus years. The last 10 or so have been in the bar and spirits industry, and the last 5 or so have been on the brand side of things. There have definitely been times when we've been where I've been out of work and, not sure where my next meal was coming from. And, that's a scary place for anyone. And over the past year, almost the entire industry was out of work at one point or another. And there's still millions of restaurants that are closed. The restaurant industry is 10 plus percentage of the workforce, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge percentage of our labor force. So to have that percentage of our labor force out of work is devastating. There's no way we would have ever anticipated such great need. And there's, even with all of the organizations out there, we're one organization. There's quite a few organizations that are doing some work in the space now. And even with all of us doing all we can, there's never going to be enough to meet the need that's out there. And there's too much work to do. And we're never going to be able to meet all that need, but hopefully that combined with us all doing as much work as we're able to, and combined with maybe some systemic changes, we should be able to help at least ease some of that pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's just go back in your career a little bit, and then we'll come back to this and just talk through kind of what people can do. But how did you start out in the industry? And I know at one point you were bartending, but what did you kind of start out doing, and how did you end up on that path and staying in it?
So, I guess it kind of depends how far back you want to go. At some point during high school, I was working at the food court at Valencia Mall, making wraps behind a quick serve counter. But I definitely didn't see that as a career option at that point. I worked somewhat in the industry during college, and afterwards, I had always wanted, since I was a little kid, I had always wanted to work at Benihana, being a Teppan chef. So every once in a while, I would apply to one or a couple of them, assuming that was never going to be an option for me. And one summer, I ended up getting picked up by the Newport Beach Benihana. And I was trained by one of the original Benihana chefs, as well as the chef who developed their chef training program. So I went through that. And interestingly, the chef training program for Benihana only teaches you the cooking part of it. All the tricks you have to kind of pay other chefs to teach you.
Huh.
Yeah, because, a lot of the chef income is tip based, and a lot of their regular guests are, specifically request for them. So if you're taking a tool out of their toolbox, you've got to kind of, pay for someone who might not be coming back to them, type of thing.
Yeah.
And all of those tricks, like balancing the egg or whatnot, or doing the volcano and stuff like that. There's all these different tricks on how to learn that without costing a bunch of product.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Because I can't imagine even trying to just the whole thing with the egg and breaking it properly. Eventually, that could go through a carton.
Or flipping a knife around without killing yourself.
True. Yeah. Yeah. True. Yeah, I kind of do that trick at home sometimes by accident, and
so I worked for them for roughly 5 years or so. I ended up learning almost every job in the restaurant, and at that point, I was just kind of like, well, I guess I'm done here. Worked at a couple other different Japanese concepts. Ended up at PF Chang's own concept called Taneko, based in Phoenix here. And worked for them for a few years, ended up becoming a bartender and manager there. And when that concept closed due to the 2000, it's right around the 2008 crash. And it was, that concept was really just kind of ahead of its time and just at the wrong place, wrong time type of thing. To give you an idea, we couldn't sell pork belly ramen to save our lives.
Yeah, now it's like people will
Now it's
stand out
everywhere.
line
Yeah,
in
yeah.
line. Yeah, go to New York at a place and like there's a line around the block or
Totally.
pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
Now it's probably around 2 blocks because of the distancing, right? It's just like a
Right.
longer line.
Yeah. So I think it was just a little bit ahead of its time, I think was one of the issues with it. And then when that crash happened, it just kind of panicked investors, and it was like the easy cut to make. After that, I moved to Rancho Pino, which is a chef-owned concept by Chef Chris Robertson, one of the probably still my favorite chef in Arizona. It was amazing, kind of slow food, farm to table type cuisine. Very, her thing was always plating as if it fell from a tree. So
Mm-hmm.
very kind of natural presentation, natural, like enhancing the natural flavors of food type of thing. She has a little bit of Italian influence from her family, but it was very much kind of like Arizona centric, very fresh seasonal food type of thing. That was the first restaurant I worked with that had bread and cheese. So, which is something you don't really think about going from, Japanese cuisine to Western cuisine. But it was very interesting, like having that background, it was very interesting to see how the methods, the different cuisines traveled to get to the same thing, like how you add salt or acidity or, different fat, different things like that are done in very different methods in Eastern versus Western cuisine. So it's very interesting to see that dichotomy and have those backgrounds kind of in the back of my mind. So when I ended up taking over the bar program there, it allowed me a flexibility in my brain to come up with maybe different flavor profile destinations than one would normally associate with a particular cuisine type. That was very much kind of a one-man show. It was really for almost the whole time I was there. If we were open, then I was the bartender type of thing. So there wasn't very many days that they were open that I wasn't there. It's just a very different experience because you don't need to, like, there's no communication needed in that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I don't need to communicate with people about prep work if I'm the one doing the prep work.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't need to communicate with people on where our inventory is at if I'm doing the inventory and ordering. We don't need to communicate, like all those things. I just have it in my brain. So when I moved over to a resort where I was the bar manager for a team of folks, I kind of had to get used to the processes involved in kind of developing the processes needed that I did internally and just instinctually, and write those out and form those into like actual procedures that the whole team had to follow. So we were on the same page.
Yeah. And so did you like that challenge and kind of going, into the operations more side of things, I guess? Like, well, operations with a team, because you were doing that at the bar. You were just running the whole show. And I don't think people realize, like, when we go up to order a drink, and maybe actually if we can go into that a little bit, like when I go up and order a drink and I look at a menu and I go, I don't want that, I want that, I look at a menu. First of all, because you created the menu, right?
Right.
So what kind of goes into that? And I know it's probably a huge question, but just when you come up with cocktails, and I don't know what the right way to say it is just cocktails or craft cocktails or whatever, like what goes into that? And what did you do in creating those? So I think that'd be interesting, just as someone who appreciates a good drink. I definitely would like to know.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And this goes kind of into once after I moved into the resort. From there, I started doing some consulting work as well. I started a small consulting business on the side and consulted for both brands and bars on their beverage list. And I think there's a few things that go into making a good menu. Like a menu we had at Rancho Pino was very different from the menu I created for Lanza Hermosa, which was very different than the menu we had for the bar or the pool at the resort, and it's very different from the bar menu that we had at the resort. And all of those are very different from consulting clients that I've had. And so, it's part of it is doing something that will work for that makes sense conceptually with the concept of the restaurant that it's situated in. Part of it is something that's will be successful for the clientele and the both the demographics and the location of the restaurant, and also price point for the restaurant. And the I think the most challenging thing, and the thing that is most often overlooked by folks creating cocktail lists, is, I guess, variety is the right word for it. Making sure that the cocktail list hits all these different points without being too focused on one area over another. I've seen some cocktail lists that have 4 or 5 peach and ginger drinks, and you're like, well, the bartender here, the bar owner here, must really like peach. Because do you really need 4 or 5 of those, or is one good enough? Right. I would argue that one stone fruit drink generally is probably good enough to meet those needs. So I've got this, it's almost like a bingo card of all the different notes you want to hit, and you also want to make sure that that cocktail list makes sense for the size of it, makes sense for the size of the rest of the menu. You don't want, I would say there's very limited situations where you would want a 4 or 5 page cocktail list if there's only 10 menu items on the food menu. So I think that's the most challenging piece of it, is making sure that you're putting the minimum amount of cocktails on with the most amount of variety.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
That makes sense.
It does. And do you have a favorite cocktail that you've come up with yourself, or is that like asking like a question like, do you have a favorite child or something? I don't know.
I mean, I've definitely had people say that to me, that is like, because that's one of the things I ask when I go to new bars. It's like, oh, what's your favorite thing? Should I try? What's your favorite thing? What do you like to make? That type of thing. And I've definitely had that answer before. And I don't know if there's anything that's more frustrating to me.
Well, because I'm like, really? I don't know. Is that spirit going to get jealous of the other spirit and have its life ruined? No. So,
I mean, I get it from both sides. I get both sides of it. The other side of it is like, well, I mean, it depends on your mood, in my feel. Because I definitely have days where I want to drink something light and refreshing, and other days where I want to drink something, like dark and boozy.
Yeah.
So it's, I think, and my taste could probably differ from anyone else's. I like something overproof, really bitter, and stirred. That's not many people's cup of tea. So chances are, if you ask me what my favorite thing on the menu is, and I give you that, chances are it's not going to be what you're looking for. So I think there's something in that question that's really requires asking more questions back than kind of the more dismissive, well, that'd be like choosing my favorite child. Like, I think you can ask additional questions and get to a better answer and I think that's probably the more correct way to go about it, rather than either just giving a random answer that might not be applicable to the person asking, or coming up with a more dismissive, I don't want to answer at all. But to that, my favorite thing I've created, I don't know if I have a good answer for that. One I talk a lot about is, I did for 1 year at the resort, I did for Thanksgiving, I made a turducken cocktail, which I thought was entertaining. Um,
So what was
uh,
in it?
it was, and I'll give this preface that this was probably 5 to 10 years ago, so it's
Okay.
probably going to sound kind of dated now.
Okay.
uh, but we did a duck fat washed wild turkey rye with cranberry syrup, lemon juice, egg white, and figgy pudding bitters.
That actually sounds really cool. I used cranberry sauce and put it with vodka and soda and rosemary on top, like sprig. That was my cocktail I did at the holidays. So I was alone in London, so I made
Mm-hmm.
cranberry sauce just to make a cocktail,
Nice.
which, but no, that sounds really cool. So like creating that though, I mean, is it just a lot of experimentation? And when you like create a cocktail, I mean, how does that go? Because I know I'll just say I'm making a Manhattan. I'm really just pouring whiskey and bitters and calling it whatever I want to. But does
Right.
it take a lot to create that? I mean, I assume it's just like even creating anything someone a chef creates, right?
Yeah, one of my probably the most useful cocktail book I own is not a cocktail book at all. It's called the Vegetarian Flavor Bible. There's the Flavor Bible and the Vegetarian Flavor Bible. I have them both, but it's basically it's a giant thick book, and it's got every ingredient you can think of, like say rosemary, and it gives you a
Mm-hmm.
list of underneath rose. If you go to, it's organized like it kind of like an encyclopedia. You can flip it. It's alphabetized by ingredient, and so you can go to rosemary, and it would give you a list of all the ingredients that pair well with rosemary, with like the super well known pairings in bold. I would argue that you would have to have some sort of conceptualization of classic cocktails and as a basis, those kind of familiar cocktail templates like a sour template or a Collins or like a cocktail Manhattan martini type of thing, old fashioned, having these different templates in your mind that you can work from. I would also argue that there's nothing that hasn't been already done. So to that end, I have very little qualms about giving away recipes and stuff like that, because I don't think there's anything that I could come up with that somebody else hasn't done already. I mean, even that turducken cocktail, and fat washing has been around for a long time, and people have definitely done stuff with duck fat before I've done stuff with duck fat. Using wild turkey for a Thanksgiving cocktail is not new at all, particularly with a combination of with cranberry. You have to have that history in the back of your mind to start out with the creation process, and then taking that and combining that with those flavor combinations that you can get
Mm-hmm.
from the flavor Bible. I think it's super helpful.
Hmm. No, that's just really cool to hear about, though. I mean, I'm someone who I've liked to go to different bars and find like speakeasy type places and stuff like that. Like, we'll talk about. Well, we can do that now and then. I mean, whatever. This doesn't have to be linear. People can be used to this. I wanted
Right.
to ask you about like a competition fundraiser you guys have coming up.
Mm-hmm.
That, and I know I think one of the judges did the place Raised by Wolves in San Diego, which
Yeah.
I went to, which that's cool because you go to the mall, but then you go behind like a fireplace, I think it is, and there's a
Yep.
whole like place. And have you been there, by the way?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool. But anyway, so let's just talk about the competition, then we'll go back to the other stuff so people can get a variety here. I hope no
Sure.
one's drinking. If you're drinking, you're not going to follow.
I mean, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, I imagine. So it's definitely not too early. So Ready Set Show is competition we are doing on May 23rd. It's it's teams of bartenders. They're given a sponsored product and a cocktail template to work with, and they create a cocktail recipe and perform a choreographed routine to music that they film. It's hosted by Meatball the Drag Queen, who was on, I think, the first season of the Boulet Brothers Dragula, which is a drag competition. Anyway, Meatball's going to be hosting, and they'll introduce the teams and their sponsors, and then we'll play this performance that the teams have made. And then we'll come back. The host and the judges will hopefully be with us there. They're live at a gay bar in LA that Meatball used to perform at all the time to kind of raise awareness for their plight. Gay bars have struggled a lot during the pandemic because, there were mostly meeting and performance spaces, which don't leave a lot of space to be able to be open with the economy shut down. And so we'll hopefully be able to showcase them, and we'll come back and the teams will get their critiques live from our judges. We've got Chris Patino, who started Raised by Wolves, and they also started Bartenders Weekend, which is where we were originally going to do this competition. We've got Bayardo, who used to be in the hospitality business as well, and now they're an actor. They're on Tiny Pretty Things, a Netflix show about dancers, and Brittany Ashley, who's a comedian and writer, and also used to be a bartender as well. So anyway, it's going to be an amazing night of some fantastic entertainment where we've been chatting with the teams as they've been putting together their performances, and they are getting very, very creative. We're very excited to see what they come up with.
And is this going to be online so people can buy a ticket and tune in? And
yeah, you can buy tickets at anotherroundevents.org. It's free to anybody in the hospitality industry. And we have a few different ticket levels for other folks. We've got the general admission ticket, which is $10 and comes with a digital program. $25 also gets you a pin and a mask. And then $100 comes with a little cocktail kit that you can make yourself a drink while you're watching the event.
That sounds like a lot of fun. So, all right. So we've talked about that competition, which I wanted to definitely do. And I wanted to just name drop a bar, basically, in San Diego. So great.
I mean, Raised by Wolves is one of the prettiest bars I've ever been to.
It's so cool.
So well done. And a little bottle shop that they have in the front has every bottle any bartender could ever want. It's a very, everything that consortium does is very well done, but Raised by Wolves in particular is incredible.
Yeah, it's just super cool. Like people in San Diego, there's a couple there's that place is one of my favorites. Then Fernside is this place in South Park that I love. And I don't know if I know that. The guy, I think I want to say he used to work at Livewire, but I don't know if that's true. But anyway, they have this one drink and it's like a peanut butter whiskey base or something like that, but I don't know, I probably got that wrong too. But anyway, it's so cool. But yeah, I miss going out to bars, so that's fun.
Right. So yeah, same.
So it's interesting to me, because a lot of times I think, I'll just speak for me, I don't know, I always want to add like a we, but I will think someone's a bartender, is that some people it's a career, some people it's just to get through college or get through whatever. And so for you, really doing this became a career, but you evolved into the operations management side, and then you did the consulting and now the nonprofit work. What made you stay with it?
That's a good question. It probably wasn't until I started working at Benihana where I really saw kind of a career path possible in the hospitality industry. Up until then, it was more just working because I needed income. And I definitely saw a career path within Benihana, but as I kind of learned more parts of Benihana's business, I also saw that as kind of limiting. And definitely no offense to anybody who's still with Benihana. It's a great company and you could do great things. But for me, I always wanted to learn more. So I can definitely see the appeal of sticking with one company and having that stability and being able to grow and move up within that company. But to me, that just wasn't my thing. I would rather learn different parts of the industry and learn more on different sides of things. So that's really been the focus for me, is what can I learn from doing this other opportunity? Moving to Rancho Pino it was to learn, Western cuisine and fine dining. Moving to the resort, it was to learn resort operations and to learn how to manage a team. Moving into consulting, it was to learn how to learn my personal business development and learn how to adapt my skills to a variety of different concepts. And moving into brand ambassador work, it's was learning the other side of the industry, like learning life as a supplier and how you're able to benefit operators and beverage directors, and what my skills and my products can help those folks better.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously moving into the nonprofit world is a whole different leap and a different side of the industry. I also spent a little bit of time with at a local distillery, and that was cool to learn, like the production side of things as well.
Yeah, so you've got a full picture now. So one thing I want to do, give you a chance to brag a little bit, but you were inducted into the Arizona Culinary Hall of Fame, correct?
Yes.
So what led to that, and how was that experience for you?
So that was while I was at the resort. At Lons, we were consistently rated in the top cocktail programs in the city, best cocktails in the city. This was I think it was the third year they even had a category for bartenders. Well, they call them beverage masters. It was, it could have been anybody in the beverage. They said bartender, brewer, winemaker. I think their barista may have been in there, or coffee roaster might have been in there. But the year I won was only the third year they gave out. They had a category for it, and the two people prior to me were also bartenders. So honestly, I went in there very clearly expecting to lose. I was up against people who were way more talented than me, and I definitely didn't write any sort of thank you speech, so I'm very embarrassed about like what afterwards I had this thing where when unbelievable things happen to me, I kind of go like a shock, like lack of emotion, lack of being able to say anything type of thing. So I'm not very proud of the way I accepted that award, because it was a huge honor and I didn't have much to say, because I really very honestly didn't think it should have gone to me. But I'm super proud of it, and I'm very humbled to have been able to receive it, and it's definitely worth bragging about for sure.
And I think you've continued to like grow in your career, and now you're adding value to the people who are in the industry. So I don't know, maybe it was just, part of it's like what you're doing after too. If you didn't think you were the one that year, certainly by now.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Hey, that's what I'm here for, So besides starting the nonprofit, which we're going to talk a little bit more about, but you also do a lot of community work and help people. And I just want to talk to you about that, because I think one thing that is important in this podcast generally to me is to talk about what the whole person's doing, because a lot of people don't see themselves as a whole person. Sometimes they just see themselves as like their work or whatever. And so can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I do, I volunteer for a number of different things. I'm on the board of directors for the USBG, which is the United States Bartenders Guild Phoenix. I've been in leadership with them for, I want to say, 5 to 7 years. I've been on their education committee. I've been the vice president, the president, and now I'm on the board of directors for them. That's kind of my biggest taste of where I've gotten leadership experience in the nonprofit world, is through the Bartenders Guild, and that's been super helpful moving into our own organization. I've also been volunteering in, I think, starting end of 2019. I started volunteering for Planned Parenthood as a clinic escort. I I got tired of protesting, particularly in the Trump era. I got tired of protesting things that I didn't like, and I wanted to fight for things that I do want. And that's kind of where that thought process was to help out with Planned Parenthood. And
what do you do with in that? Like, what's your role? Like, do you just help people and make sure that they're safely able to come and go?
Yeah. So the clinics have a volunteer escort program. Most do anyway. I'm sure it depends on where you live. Ours is currently shut down due to safety precautions with the pandemic. We're hoping to get that back up and running in the near future. And I can't tell you how excited I am to get back to work with that. It was such a fulfilling part of my weekly schedule. Losing that, particularly during the pandemic, has been very tough. But so, each location of the clinics are different, and you have, depending on which clinic you're volunteering at, there's different regulations on how far away protesters can be and where they can be and what they can do. Our goal as clinic escorts are just to identify ourselves as volunteers with Planned Parenthood and walk folks safely from their car into the clinic and give them the distraction and reassurance they need in order to not have to focus on any of the vitriol that's coming from the parking lots or from the street, depending on where they are.
Wow. That's really, I mean, I didn't know that was even like a role someone could play, I suppose. And I like that you decided, rather than protesting what you're against, you decided to do what you're for. I think that's really powerful, because we are so used to just fighting against something, right?
Right. Yeah. And to me, it's really important. I think it's just an attitude adjustment. I think it's much more empowering to be fighting for something rather than fighting against something. I think it's very easy to be against things, but coming up with alternatives to those, and it's easy to say that for-profit health insurance is garbage, but what's the alternative to that? Like, I'm using this because it's an easy alternative. Well, we can have not-for-profit healthcare where it's a single payer buy-in system, like most of the rest of the civilized world. Like, that's an easy example, but there's other situations where it's not, where I guess what it comes down to is I'm not, and maybe this is why I ended up going into the nonprofit world. It's easy to reject things and turn down things and be against things, but without having an alternative to that, it's not really productive. Do you know what I'm saying? Not that everything in life needs to be productive, but I think you're more likely to get buy-in into what you're fighting for if it's something that's, if people can see that as a way forward rather than just being, because a lot of times you can't, if you're fighting against something, you have to have that alternative in mind. Like, well, what are we going to do instead of this? Like, if we get rid of this, what are we doing? Type of thing. And so I feel like being on the other side of that and fighting for that thing you want to replace things with puts you in a much better position to have that conversation rather than just fighting against whatever it is.
Yeah, I agree. I'm doing this like public leadership credential program right now, and the current course I'm in is on moral leadership in organizations. And prior to that, I did like in personal practice, but really I've learned a ton just about what it takes to get change. And yeah, you're right. Like, change doesn't happen without having something you're going to go forward and do. I mean, you can't just say, oh, well, it's even like, I mean, for me, a big thing that I look at that I still don't understand is like the idea, like all the people who are displaced from homes, right? Nobody likes that, but it's like what's the solution? So then it's just like everyone just complains, but then, I still haven't looked up like what are the proposed solutions and stuff like that. But I just think that, it's the right thing to do is to like try to have a positive impact and try to go and change things rather than just
Where
complain about them.
where is it? I think I just read an article about, I think it's Finland eliminated houselessness by giving everybody, like providing everyone who was houseless apartments, and also kind of life service counselors.
Mm-hmm.
And that was cheaper to do than to allow houselessness to remain,
Hmm.
like to provide the services for those who are displaced from homes.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, and in Europe, they definitely look at these things differently. So it's just, I don't know. It's pretty cool that you're doing that and that you sought that opportunity. I mean, with the Planned Parenthood thing.
Yeah, Planned Parenthood has definitely been, it's, like some days are definitely better than others there. There's some days where it's very, very draining, like to have that amount of, like we try to do, all the people who volunteer are obviously amazing, and all the patients are the sweetest people. But there's some days where the protesters are just people kind of praying on the side, and it's not a big deal to be there. Like, but there's other days when folks are yelling horrible things to patients the entire time. And when patients aren't around, they're yelling horrible things at us the entire time. And those days can be tough.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that is tough. So is there anything else you wanted to talk about that you do on the side?
Yeah, the other thing I do, which I just started, so I can't tell you a whole lot about it. I just started as a precinct chair for the local Democrat Party. And so I don't know a whole lot about that yet, but I'm excited to get started. Our precinct is, it would probably take me uh, 2 to 3 hours to walk the perimeter of the whole thing. So it's not a huge area, but I'm excited to get in there and be able to work local politics and get some things to benefit our immediate community through. I'm kind of working. I also joined our local Democratic Socialist chapter, and I think that'll be good to work kind of tangentially with both of those. I'm not doing anything in leadership with the Democratic Socialist yet, kind of getting my feet wet there, trying to see what their processes are and see where I'm the best fit. I think likely I've started attending the restaurant organizing committee with them. I think that'll probably be the best fit for me, so I can help kind of work on unionizing restaurant workers.
Yeah. Oh, cool. So all this kind of gets us back to another rally. And can you talk a little bit about so say someone buys a ticket or to this event, or they just donate, and I saw you also have opportunities to volunteer on your website. So can you talk about first of all, where the money's going, what kind of services you're providing to people, and especially even around the professional development? I think that'd be cool to hear about. And then just kind of what people are investing in, I guess, as a charitable contribution.
Sure. So we raised two major pools of funds: emergency assistance and professional development. Emergency assistance is obviously a little easier to get your head wrapped around, and kind of outside of a pandemic, it would be more like things we talked about at the top of the show, raising money for some folks who are diagnosed with cancer, or people who have been in a car accident, or things like that. And then the professional development piece, that's something where we're focusing our efforts with that on folks that have been historically excluded from restaurant leadership. And the goal is to provide opportunities and resources to those folks to give them the tools and skills they need to really, accomplish their career goals and make these more, innovated kind of more dynamic workspaces that really create these spaces that we're all hoping to see in the future, with these more equitable spaces that we're all hoping to see in the future. And it's well documented that more diverse workplace populations create better products and create better outcomes. So we're really trying to help the industry get to a place where it should be, because it's been a long time coming. And I think this past year has really shined a light on a lot of the inequities baked into the system of the hospitality industry. Well, really all industries, but I think it's really opened the eyes of some people who might not have seen that before. And I think there's a larger portion of the population that's kind of open to that concept now, and sees the need and the value for moving to a place where things are a little bit more equitable, and where we can give these workers kind of can get some more value and more, a more stable situation than that maybe we have in the past.
It's good because it's something that I can say I haven't thought of. Like, I've thought about things like their wages are horrible, so they rely on tips, and that they don't generally have insurance, and like thinking about the cost of insurance, and knowing, like in my job, like in IT, like I have the luxury of, paying a lot for insurance, but still having a salary and a steady paycheck that allows me to do that, right? So there's all those kind of things. Or just even if I'm sick and I need to work, like I'm just sitting at a computer, versus like you can't run around a restaurant like that, and stuff like that. So, or time off costs you more.
Right. And there's a lot of that's kind of, it's all interconnected. Really everything is, right? But, like restaurant professionals don't have sick pay or insurance, which means they often come to work sick, which means half of the restaurant ends up getting sick, which means the restaurant has to constantly be overstaffed, and they have to have just count on a certain percentage of their staff calling in sick or calling out for the day. And it's a lot easier to call out for a shift when you're only getting paid $2 an hour to do it, and not to mention all the inequities based in tipping structures. Black women make 40 cents for every dollar a white man makes in tips. So, you can talk about, and historically tipping structures were created, kind of in that Jim Crow era, post-slavery era, as a means to employ Black workers without having to pay them. So a lot of those inequities still exist today, and it's not going to be until we address tipping structures, generally speaking, until that gets fixed. I personally, and maybe I might be rare in thinking this, but I personally would rather have a professional in my industry deciding what I'm worth and what I should be paid, rather than some random who comes in to get a drink from me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. I think tippings in particular, but compensation models just generally speaking in the restaurant industry, I think is one of the biggest inequities in our hospitality industry, and one of the things that most sorely need to be addressed if we're going to create more sustainable, more equitable models moving forward, in order to create something that will actually work for everyone.
Yeah. Gosh, it's really, I appreciate you just talking through this, because it's really interesting to think about, and especially as things are opening up after the pandemic and stuff. And just, I'm in London, so the tipping thing, it doesn't happen here. I still do it sometimes, just being still very American, but it's interesting. Even the workers here, to my knowledge, like people who were furloughed, were getting 80% of their salary this whole time. That was not happening in the States. And even if it did, if they were getting 80% of their salary, it would have been nothing to do with their tips. So that's interesting. So is there anything else you want to cover?
Right now, there's a big problem trying to hire people for the restaurant industry. And part of that is because folks are making more on unemployment. And I haven't seen a lot of self-reflection on the industry about that. Like, don't you think that that's problematic, that your workers can make more money on unemployment not working than they can for you working sometimes more than a full-time job? So I think that that's, and like the response to that is usually, well, restaurants operate on such slim margins, and I don't know if that's a good enough reason. I think that there's, every other industry, generally speaking, has to pay their employees when they're working. We don't ask any other industry to have their customers subsidize their labor pool. And, like almost all industries have some sort of amount of seasonality, particularly retail. And we don't ask customers to subsidize that employment. So I don't, and every industry has costs. So to me, writing off the need for poverty wages as because there's low margins in food service I don't know if that's an adequate answer. I feel like there's got to be methods of restructuring the way it's shaped so that there's an answer that works for everyone. I don't know necessarily what that is, but I think saying there's small margins in the restaurant industry is kind of a cop out. I think it's used as a way to not have to deal with examining that area.
Yeah, and it appeals to people, because then people will say, yes, that's right. And, and you have small business owners who say, yes, that's right. You can't. But it's like, well, then there's another problem, because if people get paid more, they will be able to spend more, and maybe.
Right. Right. It's kind of that bottom up model of stimulus rather than the top down model. Like, do we give tax breaks to the rich and corporations, or do we give more money to the unemployed and working poor? What will have a bigger benefit to communities and to the economy? Just talking about Europe and their models, like every other country has restaurants, and the vast majority of them don't have tip structures and actually pay their workers. Like, there's no reason why that can't be successful in the US.
Yeah, that's true. Well, so do you have any advice or mantra that you would like to share with the More Than Work audience?
I think it's kind of what I said before. I think it's fighting for what you're for rather than against things you're against. I think that's been helpful for me in organizing my life in a way that feels more positive, and I get more fulfillment out of that.
Yeah, I like that. And I like that even, I don't know, just going back to you mentioning that you were missing something from your weekly schedule, like during the pandemic, you weren't able to do the volunteer work. With work, we spend all this time scheduling our day within these 9 to 5, here's my day, and I have to attend these meetings, and I have to do this and that. And then it seems like, and we do that because that's how we do our job well, right? Like, we can't just say, oh, I'm not going to this meeting I'm supposed to run or something,
right,
because I don't. But then with the things that we do for ourselves, and I'm saying we, because I know there's more than me on this one, so I can't speak for more than me. We don't do that. Like, for example, I didn't go on a bike ride today, and I went to all my meetings though, and it's like, well, that was for me. And just like the volunteering, even though we're doing it for other people, it's for us too. And so I like that you kind of structure that, so you schedule those things in that are important to do. And that resonated with me a lot. So just wanted to point that out.
I mean, I definitely think it's helpful to have something, it's like scheduling meals for nourishment. It's kind of like nourishing your soul, right? So it's kind of making sure you're making that time to do stuff that feeds your soul.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, so I have a series of questions called the Fun Five that I ask every guest, and I just like having maybe a baseline to see where everyone sits in the end of it. Right. So I'll ask you those. So what's the oldest t-shirt you have and still wear?
This one's kind of a cheat because it's not actually a t-shirt. It's a Hawaiian shirt, but it's a Hawaiian shirt from a Mr. Bungle concert from 1998.
Whoa.
Summer of 1998.
Is that the year you graduated high school?
Yeah.
Nice.
So that summer is when the Mr. Bungle California album came out, and we went up to San Francisco to see the show for that. And they had like Hawaiian shirts that had the Mr. Bungle logo on it, and I got one of those, and that's still a Hawaiian shirt that I wear today.
Cool.
It's probably has too many holes to be considered for most people to wear, but it's still mostly shirt-like enough to be able to wear it at least over a t-shirt.
Cool. That's great. And it's good merch. So that's good. So the next one, if every day was really Groundhog's Day, like people have been saying, and I might have to change this question at some point, but I feel like it's still kind of a Groundhog's Day feel what we're in. What song would you have your alarm clock set to play every morning?
I'm going to go with Old 55 by Tom Waits.
Okay, cool. Nice.
Like old school Tom Waits.
Yeah, good. All right. Coffee or tea or neither?
Is both an answer?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm probably more tea than coffee, particularly after we went and visited Scotland a couple of years ago. We loved the tea culture there and like getting that tea break in the middle of the day. And I definitely have my favorite tea varietals, more so than I have my favorite coffee varietals. But, you know, like being in the beverage industry, I'm a firm believer that it's my duty to drink everything. So, you know, like I just love good, tasty things. So I don't, you know, like today I had Peruvian coffee, like single origin Peruvian coffee pour over. But, you know, like I also love Lapsang Souchong tea, or, you know, like a good, like really good Genmai cha, or just my cha tea. So I think, I don't know, both, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I've never heard anyone say that tea name either. Colin Hay, do you know Colin Hay? He was led Men at Work, the band, and then he has a wonderful, like, just a beautiful solo career. Like I don't know if there's a reason he would come on here. I'd love to talk to him, but he has a song called, I think, Beautiful World, and he talks about that tea actually, because he's from
Which one? Lapsang or
yeah. So it's kind
have you ever had it?
No.
It's kind of like the Scotch of the tea world. It's like a smoked black tea. So it's this beautiful kind of rich, smoky, earthy, almost like nutty flavor of tea. So cool. It's really great for cocktails, particularly non-alcoholic cocktails. It works great in because it adds this like rich complexity that you can't get, you know, like a lot of times non-alcoholic cocktails are these like fruity nonsense, like fruity, sugary nonsense that are just kind of like afterthoughts, but that gives some depth of character that's hard to get. I mean, tea in general is great for non-alcoholic cocktails because of that, but the Lapsang particularly adds this complexity that's tough to get in cocktail forms.
Oh, cool. I'll have to check that out. All right. And can you think of a time that you like just laughed so hard you cried, or just something that like makes you kind of lose it, maybe misbehave on meetings or something like that?
It happens a lot. And honestly, it's usually something that's not funny that I think of myself and is not funny to anybody else. But I just lose it, and then I can't stop laughing for 5 to 10 minutes.
Understandable. As a comedian, I'm very familiar with that. So
I usually think I'm funny, but the chances are that translates into other people thinking I'm funny is usually not a very big portion of the Venn diagram.
Awesome. All right, and my last one: who inspires you right now?
Who inspires me? I mean, I guess it kind of depends which part of my world I'm thinking about. I'm so lucky to have Amanda as my co-founder. She's her career path and mine have been kind of similar directions, but I mean, she's just so dynamic and so charismatic and is such a wonderful, caring person and has such great ideas about everything that I'm very lucky to be able to talk and, you know, like just be in the room with her and be able to have that insight and perspective when we're talking and ideating around things that could help the industry. So I'm very, very humbled and happy to be in her orbit. I mean, our whole board of directors is super inspiring for different reasons. I'm very inspired by the work that 86 The Barrier and Turning Tables are doing. 86 The Barrier is an organization out of New York that's doing language programs, English and Spanish language programs for folks in the hospitality industry. That their work is incredible. Turning Tables is an organization out of New Orleans that's providing a hospitality education for folks who are primarily and other workers of color that are looking to kind of step up their hospitality game, and giving them it's kind of like an externship program. They go through a career development course, and then they work with local New Orleans restaurants to get them placed in whatever part of the industry they're looking to get in. And they're just doing phenomenal work and raising some soon to be new leaders in the industry. So that's very cool to see. We've got Bartenders Trust out of the UK and Bartenders Benevolent Fund out of Canada, who are both doing kind of similar work at us, and we kind of see them as kind of sister organizations in our space, and they're doing some really incredible work as well, and we've been inspired by some of what they do as well. I mean, like I said, there's just so much work that needs to be done. There's no shortage, and there's no shortage of people who have stepped up to do some of that work. So we find inspiration all over the place with that, and we're just lucky to be in the orbit of some of these folks and be able to talk and bounce ideas off them. And Radical Exchange, Ashton Berry, also in New Orleans. She's consultant, hospitality professional, sommelier, and activist. And I don't know if there's anybody more inspiring in the space of reimagining equity in hospitality spaces and what a future hospitality industry could look like, and everything. And she's also just like a great researcher. She's a great, very, very, I don't know, there's nobody I've seen who's as great as researching and creating very well thought out programming. She's just amazing. And also Jackie Summers up in New York as well. He was the first Black distiller post-prohibition. He created a product called Sorel, and he has navigated the hospitality world primarily most of his life as the only Black person in the room. So the conversations he's able to have and the insights he's able to provide coming from that perspective is hugely inspiring. And all of these folks are just some of the best people I've ever met. I mean, there's no other way to say it. I'm a better person for having met each one of these people, and I could never thank any of them enough for all the insight they've given us and the amount of help we've gotten from the way, and the belief they've had in us. Lindsay from Lush Life, she's another person. The whole Lush Life crew, Liz and Brittany and all of them, they've really been super inspiring and helpful for us. Lush Life, to give you a little bit of background, they do a lot of bartender events. They bartender summer camp called Camp Run Amok in Kentucky, and like a bartender education series in Portland called Portland Cocktail Week. And both of those were instrumental in me coming up in the bar industry, kind of on the education side of things. They were super helpful for me, and I've learned so much from them. And I mean, we continue to learn so much from Lindsay. Lindsay's on our advisory council. Oh, cool. And Ashton's on our advisory council. Jeffrey from Turning Tables is on our advisory council. We get a lot of help from these. We lean on that advisory council a lot just to, make sure that what we're doing is well thought out and that we're not missing something, and that when we go forward with something, that we're doing it with intentionality and getting the results that we're hoping to see.
Cool. I mean, no, that's great. And it's like a good list of orgs for people to look up too. So if someone wants to know more about you or know more about another rally, what what should they do? Where should they go online? And I'll have this in show notes too.
Anotherrally.org is our website, and that's got probably all the information you need. That's where you can donate. That's where you can see what aid programs we currently have available. Those are changing and being updated all the time. We also have a list of resources on there, both professional development and kind of health and wellness resources are available as well. We also have some, additional things on there, like ways you can contact us if you want to, if there's some sort of custom programming you want to run through us, or, we've done kind of GoFundMe style campaigns for different people or businesses that are in need. And those have been super successful. We've been lucky to help out some folks by doing that. And you can also buy some merch from us through that. That's probably the best place. And then we're on all social media as well. We're on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook as well, and LinkedIn.
Okay, super. Well, Travis, this has been really fun and very insightful. So thanks for taking the time to chat with me today.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It was really good to talk to you. My wife Cheyenne and I were talking about when we met up with you at Amoria Margo the other day. What a fun little trip that was.
Yeah, it was cool. That's when I was living in the city, right? So it was just, New York City. I mean, that's a great place too. So yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, I love that bar. That Souther, the owner of that spot, we were in a cabin together at Camp Run Amok one year. So kind of a little full circle moment there.
So crazy. Well, awesome. Well, thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks again for listening this week. You can find out more about the guest in the show notes and at robbiasaid.com. Joe Mafia created the music just for this podcast. Find him on Spotify. That's Joe, Maffia. And Rob Metke is responsible for our visual design. You can find him online by searching for Rob, Metke. Thanks, Rob. Let me know who you'd like to hear from or about your own experiences defining yourself outside of work. Follow at More Than Work Pod or send a message on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Or visit our website, morethanworkpod.com. Give us a follow on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a review if you like. Thanks for listening to More Than Work. While being kind to others, don't forget to be kind to yourself.